What's up, guys? It is your boy Samoan Fan 101, and today we're going to be looking at the third film of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. This time we're looking at the sequel to the first Iron Man 2. This was released in the United States in May of 2010. It had a $200 million budget, which definitely shows because there were a lot more special effects and a lot more things going on in this film, and definitely more cast members, which also played a part. This film, not as good as the first one. I still enjoy it, and I still call it an alright film, but it's not perfect. This is also the first MCU film, because from after Iron Man and the Incredible Hulk, they stopped using Avi Arad as their producer and went with Kevin Feige as the head producer from now going forward. So just to give a little bit of background on that one. Real quick, I gotta bring up the fact that Terrence Howard was replaced in this film by Don Cheadle in the role of Colonel James Rhodes, aka War Machine. And look, you can argue exactly what happened. Terrence Howard said at one point that, I don't know if he says it now, but at one point he said that Robert Downey Jr. had something to do with his being replaced. Other people say that Terrence Howard thought of himself as a big hotshot and demanded more money than he was supposedly worth, I guess. We don't know exactly what happened, and it was a messy situation for a little bit there. The one positive that came out of all of this was that we got Don Cheadle as War Machine, who's been playing the character ever since. Now, with that being said, let's get into the actual plot here. I'll get into the little bits later. So what's going on? Well, we get a recap in the beginning of the film. We get a recap of Iron Man, what happened at the end of Iron Man, where, of course, Tony Stark revealed himself to be the Iron Man. At the exact same time that is happening, a Russian man by the name of Ivan Vanko, in Russia, a man by the name of Ivan Vanko is watching this live. And he's a scientist. His father, Anton Vanko, who was also watching it, dies and says that what Tony Stark has, it should have belonged to Ivan. And during the opening credits, which much like the Incredible Hulk, the opening credits was absolutely stunning in how it was done. Maybe not as stunning, but definitely good nonetheless. It was very entertaining, the opening credits. Again, one of the best parts of the film. Much like Incredible Hulk. We see him build his own arc reactor, very similar to Tony Stark's arc reactor. 6 months later, Tony Stark is on top of the friggin' world, and of course is using his suit for basically peaceful means. He's not using it as a weapon for the government, and that causes a problem. He reinstitutes the Stark Expo, which apparently was his father's creation going all the way back to the 50s. At least I believe it was going back to the 50s. I'm not exactly sure. What I do know is that the last Stark Expo was back in 1974. And of course, it was started by his father, Howard Stark. A lot of things are going on at the same time. The most immediate is that the palladium, the arc reactor that's made out of palladium from the first film, is slowly, even though it's keeping Stark alive, it's also slowly poisoning him, and he doesn't know how long he has until he dies. So, and of course, the very apt line that Jarvis tells him, the very device that's keeping him alive is slowly killing him. And at this time, he cannot find a suitable replacement for palladium. And because of this, he grows reckless, and he starts giving away his stuff. He even steps down and appoints Pepper Potts as the new, of course, his assistant Pepper Potts, played again by Gwyneth Paltrow, as the new CEO of Stark Industries. And Natalie Rushman becomes his assistant for the time being. Also, at the same time, the government is after Tony Stark's Iron Man suit, because they see it as a weapon. But of course, Tony Stark not only claims that nobody else has this technology, and further proving it by showing that several countries constantly messing it up, he also goes out of his way to embarrass his business rival, his corporate rival, Justin Hammer, who's of course the head of Hammer Industries. Because he was also trying to work on an Iron Man suit. And of course, with this going on, Colonel James Rhodes, like I said, played by Don Cheadle in this film, he's sticking his neck out for Tony, but that's not helping much because Tony's acting like a drunk asshole. At the same time, though, we have S.H.I.E.L.D. going down Tony's neck about the Avengers Initiative, which is kind of sprinkled here throughout. And another thing that's brought up is Tony's relationship to his father, Howard Stark, which shows that, yeah, they did not have a good relationship at all. In fact, Tony thinks that his father absolutely hated his guts. And of course, you got Ivan Vanko, who appears at one point, and of course, Tony Stark, even though he proved and made adamant the fact that nobody else had this technology, you have Ivan Vanko who shows up at a racing expo, like a race thing, where Tony Stark, of course, races in an actual race car. I wonder if Robert Downey Jr. actually rode in a race car, or was that all fancy special effects? And of course, he's wielding similar technology, Ivan Vanko is, to very similar to Iron Man, using the arc reactor and everything. So his reputation is getting more and more damaged. Ivan Vanko is sent to prison, but is saved by Justin Hammer, so that way he can make suits and later on make drones for Justin Hammer. And Justin Hammer thinks, oh, we're going to take Stark down together. Really, Vanko is just yanking this guy's chain. Is basically using him so he can try to kill Stark once again. And of course, Vanko knows the fact that Tony has palladium poisoning. And of course, he knows that it's a very painful way to die. You're probably wondering, who the hell is Ivan Vanko? Ivan Vanko is the son of Anton Vanko, which I mentioned earlier. Anton Vanko and Howard Stark at one time worked on the arc reactor together. But when Anton found it as a way to get rich instead of giving the next evolutionary stage of development and technology, and when Howard found out about it, he had the guy deported back to Russia, and they even left. And of course, when Anton couldn't do anything for the Russians, he was sent to Siberia, and yeah, that really put a hatred on Anton's heart and passed it on to Ivan. And of course, Ivan feels that everything that Tony has should have belonged to him because of the legacy of their fathers. So that's what's going on there, and that's why Ivan wants to kill Tony Stark. Then, of course, we have a bunch of shit going on. Natalie Rushman is revealed to be Natasha Romanoff, who is, of course, Black Widow, played in this film by Scarlett Johansson, and is sent in as a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent by Nick Fury, and to kind of evaluate him for the Avengers Initiative, and as well as to keep an eye on him, especially with the sickness in his arc reactor. Meanwhile, while this is also going on, the whole government thing is happening. Colonel Rhodes is fed up with Tony's shit, and after one last warning, he steals the Iron Man suit Mark II, and goes back to the military, and Justin Hammer upgrades it and retrofits him and calls him, of course, War Machine. With that being, so yeah. Basically, bunch of shit goes down. Thanks to a puzzle inadvertently left by Howard, Tony finds out how to create a new element, or should I say rediscover a new element, and use that as an arc reactor core instead, which immediately cures him of his poison. Justin Hammer, of course, everything goes down. Tony shows up at the Stark Expo presentation that Hammer is showing off, and Ivan, who of course took over things behind the scenes, takes over all the Hammer drones that he built for Justin Hammer, and also the War Machine suit, and faces that off against Iron Man. You got Black Widow, who invades the facility where Vanko's at, and gives control of the War Machine suit back to Colonel Rhodes. War Machine and Iron Man go on to fight the Hammer drones, and finally Ivan Vanko shows up, who, by the way, in this film is kind of a mix of two villains. He's physically he looks like Whiplash, and as well as his weapons. But apparently, from what I know, he has a backstory more in line with the Crimson Dynamo. And from what I've heard, the Crimson Dynamo is one of Tony Stark's more personal rivals, so to speak. Similar to, say, a Green Goblin or a Doc Ock to Spider-Man sort of thing. So they fight. Iron Man and I was going to say Don Cheadle. Iron Man and War Machine win. A bunch of shit goes down. Pepper Potts and Tony Stark finally kiss after 2 films. Happy Hogan, played by Jon Favreau, is still fat, so take that for what it's worth. And because of everything that went on, S.H.I.E.L.D., Fury tells Stark that S.H.I.E.L.D. is only going to use him as a consultant, and Stark and Rhodes, Colonel Rhodes, get presented for medals at the end of the film. In the post-credits scene, we see Phil Coulson, who earlier in the film was sent to New Mexico for whatever reason, and he goes to a location of a crater, which we see a hammer, and then we hear lightning, which of course alludes to alludes to Thor, god of lightning. Okay, so if you were able to keep up with everything that I just said, there is a lot of plot in this film, and that's ultimately the film's biggest weakness, is its plot, and the fact that it doesn't have as good a structure as the first film does. The first film told a simple story, but executed very well with colorful characters, and its plot overall was very concise, with just one twist in there to kind of move things around a little bit to make things more interesting. This film had twists and turns all over the place. It was like a freaking 4-way highway intersection. It was nuts. Absolutely nuts, and that's part of the movie's biggest problem. It's the fact there's too much shit going on. But, okay. But that's the bad. Let's get to the good, because let's face it, there is a lot of good in this film, and I think some people overreacted to this film by saying that, oh, the film sucked, it wasn't as good as the first one, which it wasn't. They're saying it's a bad film. I don't know what these guys are smoking. I don't know if they saw the movie that I saw. Personally, I thought that it was not a very good film. I thought it was a decent film. It was an alright film. Sorry about that. Woke up early this morning. It was an alright film. Okay, so what's good about this film? Well, let's go to some of the easier stuff. Let's go to the cast. Most of the people in this film do a great job in their role. Robert Downey Jr., of course, is great as always as Tony Stark / Iron Man. And something that I did not bring up in my my first Iron Man review, and I gotta mention this, is like, did you guys notice how Robert Downey Jr. seems to have a lot more hair in the first 2 films than he did later on? I noticed it. And maybe it's a style choice, but considering that Robert Downey Jr. is in his early 30s, and he's in his early 50s, not exactly hard to see why his hair seems to be thinning out. Gwyneth Paltrow, of course, does great as Pepper Potts. Don Cheadle, like I said, is a much big improvement over Terrence Howard as James Rhodes. Sam Rockwell as Justin Hammer. On the one, it's a good thing and a bad thing. I'll mention the negative thing later. The good thing about Justin Hammer is that Sam Rockwell does his best with his role and makes it over the top and enjoyable at the same time. So on the one hand, Sam Rockwell does a good performance, but there is a negative side to it, which I'll get into a bit. And of course, Samuel Jackson as Nick Fury He's good for what he's in the film. Mickey Rourke as Ivan Vanko. Mickey Rourke puts in a great performance in the role. He really sells it, and sells the fact that he sounds Russian, even though I'm not sure Mickey Rourke has a single ounce of Russian in him whatsoever. Jon Favreau, of course, returns as Happy Hogan. Clark Gregg returns as Agent Coulson. And John Slattery appears in this film in certain images here and there as a somewhat younger Howard Stark. All of them do a great job. Just to make that point very clear, all of them do a great job in their respective roles. Of course, you got Paul Bettany as Jarvis, who's entertaining in that weird sense. Now, what's funny about this film, and I actually looked this up. Okay, remember at the very end scene when the fighting is going on with all the hammer drones? You have the little kid who's in the Iron Man mask, and he's got the thing, the repulsor thing, and right before a drone is about to kill him, Iron Man saves him. Well, apparently, according to the MCU, according to the MCU people, particularly Kevin Feige, apparently that's actually supposed to be Peter Parker. Yes, the same Peter Parker who would later on become Tom Holland in Spider-Man: Homecoming and Captain America: Civil War. Technically, that's the first time we see Peter Parker in the MCU. They retroactively did that as they were making Spider-Man: Homecoming. But like, oh, that's Peter Parker. Which, of course, makes sense why Peter Parker idolizes Iron Man so much. He saved his life when he was a kid. That part actually makes sense a little bit. So, you know, a nice little Easter egg there. But okay, the casting's good. The special effects, of course, are great. All of them do a great job in terms of, you know, the suits and the drones and everything. All of them look very, very well done. The cinematography, though not as good as in this film as it was in the first film, is still pretty good. Similar to the music, not as good as in the first film, but it still has some good music, mostly relying on contemporary songs that are already made by artists and not musical scores made by composers. Now, with that said, we got a lot of good things. What are some of the bad things? I gotta get into this, and the first one I gotta get into is the one actor that I didn't find that entertaining in this film, and it sucks, because I loved this character later on. Scarlett Johansson as Black Widow. I'm gonna say it right now, she was the one character I really didn't like in this film, and it sucks, because I really liked her in Avengers. I loved her in Captain America: Civil War, and she's been pretty much great ever since then in every film she's been in. But the problem, I think, with her character is the fact that A, wasn't given a proper introduction, it kind of came right the hell out of nowhere, and B, she really came across as superhero eye candy. I think I mentioned in a previous video that there was a time when all comic book films seemed to be was having the token hot chick in it with having no relevancy whatsoever other than just being the hot chick. I once said that Malene Ackerman in Watchmen was the last time we really saw this. I take it back. Scarlett Johansson as Black Widow in Iron Man 2 was the last time we really saw this. Ever since then, films have, yeah, they've been hot, but they've also had characters and you can actually relate to them. Scarlett Johansson, okay, the problem with her character is that it feels forced. It feels like they shoehorned her character into the film. Which, yeah, you could say they did that in Captain America: Winter Soldier, but the difference was they made it work in that film because she was a part of field. They made it organic. Here it felt phoned in. It felt forced. And on top of that, she did not do a good job in her role. And this is just a nitpick, but her fighting with the long curly hair, in my opinion, kind of didn't work. Because it's like she's hot, but she can fight at the same time. It's like, yeah, Elektra could do that too. That film wasn't exactly too good, was it? So, yeah. The one character I really did not like in this film was Natasha Romanoff, and that makes me sad that I have to say that. But on top of that, the many plot points of this film, half of them either go nowhere or leave like an unwanted house guest. The government, who in this film is represented by Senator Gary his name is the actor's name is Gary Shandling. Let's see if I can find the name of his character. I can't. It's not showing up on here. Anyway, Gary Shandling plays the senator who wants Tony Stark to give up the Iron Man suit. And to be fair, Gary Shandling is actually very entertaining in the 2-3 scenes that he's in, especially near the end when especially with his banter back and forth with Iron Man, where on TV they censored, of course, but he says "fuck you, Tony Stark, fuck you, buddy." I'm like, okay, that made me laugh, and made me laugh hard. That was awesome. Oh yeah, that's right. I mentioned earlier Sam Rockwell as Justin Hammer. I said earlier that Sam Rockwell did a good job portraying the role of Justin Hammer. There is one flaw to this thing, though. Justin Hammer overshadows Mickey Rourke half the time as the villain of the movie. Most of the like in the beginning, it's kind of half and half, but mostly it's on Mickey Rourke and his goal to kill Iron Man. And then, of course, the partnership with Justin Hammer springs up, and we go on from there. Now, at the same time, though, we see more Justin Hammer, and there's a good amount of time where Mickey Rourke as Ivan Vanko, he just disappears from the film for a good half an hour or so. And I'm like, well, where's the guy that's supposed to be the main villain of the movie? I mean, and it sucks because he does a great job. He's got a great backstory. He's got a really cool look to him. And he was played by a very good actor. But the problem is they did not focus on him long enough. They focused way too much on the S.H.I.E.L.D. stuff. They focused way too much on Howard Stark's, on the whole Howard-Tony thing, which really didn't go anywhere that much. And really wasn't brought up that much again until Captain America Civil War. Then we had, Captain America Civil War. Then we had the government stuff trying to take the suit away, and the whole thing with Colonel Rhodes taking the suit. And while and a little bit of a nitpick, but while I did kind of enjoy the fight between Iron Man and Colonel Rhodes, I really did think that if they could have played it a lot more seriously, like they actually fought. Not that it went by like kind of like a joke, because you hear like music in the background, like fun pop music almost. It just doesn't work that well. The fight scene is entertaining, even though the way it's done is kind of dumb. It is entertaining, and you also have Robert Downey Jr. acting like a complete dick. Now look, I know the guy is dying of poisoning, but he's acting like a little bit too much of an asshole to people that are his friends. I understand acting like an a-hole to other people that he doesn't know, that makes sense. But he's acting like an asshole to everyone, to the point where there are moments where it's like, come on, dude, just admit that you are dying and that you seriously need help. And it's one of those things where it's like, come on, man, that's too assholey. That's too much of an asshole, so to speak. The only thing that saves it is the fact that it is Robert Downey Jr. and he is very entertaining at the role. So yeah, you have several plot lines that they're going on way too much at the same time, and it tends to overshadow the film, and most especially overshadow the main villain. You should not. Okay, it's okay to have a side villain in films. In the first film, we had Obadiah Stane as the main villain. And then we had the leader of the Ten Rings, Raza, who was the bald Islamic dude. He was the side villain. In this film, it's okay to have a side villain in Justin Hammer, but when your side villain overshadows the main villain, that's a problem. I don't care how good you are in your role. That's a developmental issue, and you should have had that fixed while it was being made. With all that said, this film is still a lot of fun. It still's got the things you want to see. You still got plenty of Iron Man, plenty of action, plenty of special effects. Tony Stark doing what he does best, which is building shit. And we see, and of course we see Iron Man Marks 4, 5, and 6. I really like the design of Mark 5. I really liked seeing the design of Mark 5, and Mark 6 with the triangular chest piece was really cool looking. Overall, I'm going to give it a low 7 out of 10. Still fun, still enjoyable, but not as enjoyable as the first film. I still see, go check it out. It's still a nice, fun movie. It's nothing worthwhile. It's not like, in the sense that it's not going to blow your balls out of the water like the first Iron Man film did. But it is an enjoyable piece of film nonetheless. Like I said, kind of on the lower end, but 7 out of 10. So until next time, guys, be well, stay safe. I'll see you later, guys, when I review Thor, which was released in 2011. So until then, take care, guys.